Hello and welcome at Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith and right next to me is my lovely co-host, the Chattering Teacup.
Hello.
And here with us, returning guest, James Michels. James, hello and welcome back on our show.
Thank you for having me back. It was a pleasure last time, and I was really excited for this one, too.
So are we, and you are most welcome back. And you have been, like I said before we started the recording, a busy little bee. Writing and doing lots of PR for your books because the sequel to Ice Rising came out last year, Icebox, and this year Livestock Corners in January. Good Lord. Tell us a little bit about Icebox. How did your main character come to the situation he is in this book?
So I don't want to give too much away for those that haven't read Ice Rising yet, but because of certain events that ended at the end of Ice Rising, Alex, or we know him as Ice, has gotten into quite a bit of trouble. So what he does is he's charged with some serious crimes, but using his contacts in the police department and in the courts, he's able to get the more serious charges thrown out. However, he has to plead guilty to a couple of gun charges. So he's given a relatively moderate sentence, and he's sent to prison. So now he is locked up. So now we have gone from off the street, and the setting is now behind the walls. While he's in there, his initial plan is to lay low, not get into trouble, just go through these next few years, get on parole, go home, go back to business. But then he gets contacted from somebody on the outside who basically tells him, listen, you made a lot of money for people. Everybody's very happy, but you're going to be in there for a while. It's only a matter of time before somebody realizes or feels like they can do what you can do better than you can. So you have to figure out how to make money while you're in prison in order to keep everybody loyal to you. Then he also has other problems where some of his enemies from the street are actually incarcerated in the very same prison with him. And so now he has to navigate those waters. Plus he meets new people in prison who, well, let's just say that life can be a little, especially in prison, can be very unpredictable.
To put it mildly, to be honest, I mean, your main character, Ice, or Alex, he's fairly young. I mean, he appears to be the hardened criminal, but when you take his age into account, I mean, he comes across like a high flyer in his line of work. And like you said, then things happen and he's thrown into prison. But he has wit. He knows how to handle himself and he doesn't back down.
Right, definitely. Just kind of, and he's very adaptable. There's ways he has to learn how to defend himself in prison that, maybe the streets hadn't really taught him. In the streets, they have guns. There's no guns in prison. So thankfully, he was a good fighter. He knew how to fight, so he has that going for him. But yeah, it's just, if it's hard to avoid enemies out in the world, now you're locked up behind walls with these people. And what doesn't help the matters is the fact that there's prison politics that he has to abide by. So certain people that he, that can't go after because they're allied with people that are allies with people he's allied with. Yeah. And now they have no choice but to deal with each other.
How realistic are these circumstances with the prison politics and charges getting thrown out? Is that the way it's done, sadly, or a bit of poetic license?
So a lot of it was poetic license. I mean, the fact that the very detective that was put in charge of Alex's case just so happened to be the detective that's in his pocket is very, it's very unlikely. So definitely some poetic license with that. With the prison element, having experience in prison, not being incarcerated, but working there, I really tried to keep it as, let me put it this way. I try to keep it as realistic as possible in some parts, and then other spots that I felt needed the poetic license, I gave it that. Because that's the thing about me is I try to really put a lot of authenticity and then putting, that definitely kind of not impossibility, but very unlikely circumstances or what have you in the book, such as with the Battle of Johnny Carlo. I remember somebody reviewed my book and they said they found it unlikely that there's a scene where Leisha roundhouse kicks a guy in the face and knocks him out. And they said, I just don't find that very realistic. I said, okay, I mean, point taken, but what about the scene when Brutus punches a hole through the door? Just, like in a horror movie.
I mean, it depends on the door. I mean, I've known doors where that can happen.
And there are some
when he was or when he busts through the wall, he picks a guy up.
Also, that can also happen, I suppose. Can it not? I mean,
it probably could. I mean, I did make the wall cheap. The wall was cheaply made.
Yes, exactly.
And he's a very big guy. So.
It's a matter of probabilities. Not nearly 100, but maybe 0 points.
I mean, it could not happen here. Mostly not in the older buildings here in Europe because brick walls, it's not be done. But when you think of, like you said, the cheap buildings, I mean, walls between rooms, that can happen anytime, I suppose.
If you're big enough,
Yeah, exactly.
I think I made him almost 7 feet tall and like 400 pounds. So he could probably be able to do it.
Yep.
But the thing that I wanted to make different with Ice Rising is when people look into like prison movies, they like to kind of see the whole inmates versus the guards type situation. And from what I've seen working in prison, I went a different approach. And I, as you've read the book, I keep the staff people relatively neutral. In their appearance, because from a prison perspective, a lot of times they are a pretty neutral presence. When he goes to his housing unit that he's going to be living in, they have an officer there that's a regular officer, meaning that's where he works 5 days a week. And he says to Ice, listen, I'm not here to crack down on you. So as long as you do your time and keep it quiet, I won't have to come down hard on you. And that's from what I've observed, that's most officers, I'd say. So that's the authenticity that I really wanted to enthusiastically put out there, because whenever it's kind of an issue for me when I see a lot of prison shows, prison movies where the guards are either extremely corrupt or they're very abusive or they're just incompetent. And just having worked in a prison for going on 8 years now, that's just not what that's not what I've seen. I think it's just a very bad stereotype. So that's something I really wanted to put out there for that book. And then with Ice, I wanted to really, because one of my strengths is relationships. So I wanted to emphasize his relationships with people on the outside and people that he has in prison, which is something that I've seen. Being in prison is a very stressful situation, especially for men that are incarcerated. They have to, maintain relationships with people on the outside.
Yeah,
which is pretty hard.
So,
yeah, I suppose it is. I mean, you said comparing this to the movies or TV shows and so on. Are you a bit like a doctor who watches these films and TV shows and thinks, oh no, or says every time in the scene, oh no, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. That's completely wrong.
Or can you turn it off?
I do watch them. I'm a big fan of watching documentaries, or there's a show on there, I believe, called The World's Toughest Prisons, about a man who spends a week in these prisons. He's a journalist. He spends a week in these different prisons in different areas of the world to kind of judge their systems. So I find that fascinating, just comparing different systems between the countries. But I remember one time I did comment on a prison scene in a movie on YouTube. I just said, "Oh, here's how it would really happen." And then that was like 2 years ago. People are still replying to that. So every week I get 2 or 3 comments where it's like, this guy needs to relax and just chill out. So I said, okay, all right, I'm sorry.
Just say.
What's so funny is that comment has gained so much traction. I've been tempted to go back on there after 2 years and just say, hey, since this is getting a lot of traction, for those of you that don't know me, my name is James Michels. I write books, and here's the list.
Yeah. why not? Maybe you should do that. You mentioned prison politics, and it was also fascinating for me to learn about these different kind of groups you just mentioned, and also the fact that we have this first-person narration in your book. We experience everything through Ice's eyes. What he sees, what he learns. I mean, the first inmate he comes in contact with, his first cellmate, he is an older man and he's in there for life. I think I'm not giving away anything mentioning that. And he tells him, listen, there is a lot you have to learn. It's your first time. Be careful. And as things continue and happen, he also tells him, be careful who you trust. And I didn't get the impression that he was a part of any of those groups. How hard or how easy is it for someone who is older to stay out of this different kind of groups who, I don't know, compete with each other in prison?
It depends on just kind of the prison that you're at. But his character, we can go ahead and his name's Virgil, kind of a reference to Dante.
Mm-hmm.
He's already been in prison quite a bit, so he already has that reputation. He walks the yard alone. He's got some friends, but he's not really his type of prisoner is not going to be really bothered by the gang leaders because they're focused more on getting the new guys to join up with them. They're not really going to mess with somebody that's already been in prison for a while because they figure, they really can't try anything with him because he can handle himself. He's been down. He knows the ins and outs. And a lot of it is that when people go to prison, you're not surrounded by 7 guys and say, all right, you're going to join us or we're going to kill you. It's pretty optional to join, the gangs.
Okay. And I have to admit, I looked up a few gangs you mentioned and I thought, okay. And especially to find out which ethnicity they represent, let's put it that way. And it was interesting for me to learn when I looked them up that prison gangs started in the 50s and 60s, as far as I could see when I looked them up. Why then? What happened in the system? Did the system change? Were more people incarcerated? Why then? Do you have any idea?
Do you know who started, maybe?
So, to be honest, I haven't gone into researching why exactly it happened. I think it's just if I had to hazard a guess, it was probably because of culture, just because people that are, look alike tend to also have similar cultures. So there's that familiarity among strangers, I'd say. And then it just became the system. The whites stick with the whites, black people stay with, the black inmates stay with black inmates. And I mean, that's just kind of how it's been. I mean, you do see the races being friends with each other and stuff. And a lot of it is prisons. There's similarities between prison cultures, but there's also differences. Over in California where this takes place, it's more emphasized about the races. I've heard stories of, especially when one race is a stark minority among, the groups. So they have to have that kind of, so if you take a population where only 10% of the population is black and, they're Crips and Bloods, which out in the world are warring gangs, but now you're in prison and you're drastically outnumbered. And especially if your enemies outnumber you, now it's time to kind of set aside those differences for now and deal with and deal with the greater threat. So I think if I had to specify myself, it would be because just the different cultures, having that kind of familiarity with people and whatnot.
And could one also say, sorry, Jacob, that prison culture or this gang community in prison reflects a little bit the outside world then?
In a way. I mean, the thing about prison is that it's basically a small city. So a lot of what goes on in there it does have parallels to the outside. For example, like us as officers, we're seen as, cops. We're basically the police of of the prison, and the inmates are our citizens. Except, the difference is we're not recruited from that population, whereas now in the world, they are recruited from the population.
And just a quick question. A life sentence in the US means they won't come out alive.
It depends on the life sentence. So, there's a thing called natural life, and it just depends on what state you're in. Some have a thing called mandatory life sentence, which means that, there's life without parole and there's life with parole. So life without parole means you will not leave prison, except maybe on a compassionate release, which would be if an inmate is terminally ill and they said, okay, you have no chance of, you will not see next year. We'll let you go home. Your family will take care of you. That's very rare. Then you have life with the possibility of parole, which means you could spend the rest of your life in prison, but typically after a certain amount of time in prison, you will be eligible for parole, which means you have the chance of going home. Typically it's like 20 years or so. At least from where I'm at. And I've seen guys with life sentences go home. So it depends on the charge you're looking at, how old you were when you committed that crime. Because I don't know if it's in every state, but in many states, it's illegal to give somebody below the age of 18 a life sentence. So, yeah, I mean, it really does depend on the state and the system. And then you have the federal system. I'm not sure what their policy is on life sentences.
Interesting.
Yeah. And Ice, he does have a moral code, does he not? I mean, outside of prison, he has his moral code, and he takes this moral code inside with him. Because when Virgil warns him about his, let's say, business partner, he says, be careful, because what I've heard, you should take care who you align yourself with. And this person may not be the best choice for a business partner, because he does not share, he does not say it like that, but I suppose one could say he does not share your moral code. Could we say that's true for Ice, his moral code? Also, when outside he has certain ideals which he does not want to give up. Yeah, I mean, he pretty much sides with this character. He does business with him out of necessity. He's pretty much up against a corner at this point. And also, he reasons with himself, okay, there's a difference between what you've heard and what is. And at this point, he's not in the position to kind of, beggars can't be choosers, True. He hasn't done him wrong at this point, so he doesn't see a problem with that. Yeah, not yet, as we learn. Dear listeners, you should read it. But it was interesting because I don't want to give it away. I mean, his outside moral codes were also interesting in what to do in his business and what not to do. Well, how far to go. Yeah, how far to go. He does draw a line. Yeah. Definitely. But one of the things about him is that you can see the degradation of his character. That, he's thrown in, he's in the streets, which is a very rough style of living. And then he's put in prison, which is, in my opinion, even worse. Because there's less access to positive influence. As you can see, whereas out in the street, he's able to see his family whenever he wants. Now that he's in prison, he has to... they have a schedule of when they can come see him, for how long they can come see him, if they're even allowed to come see him, just depending on his, if they're even allowed to. Yeah. Because, they have to apply. They can't just say, I'm here to see, Alex Lincoln. No, they have to actually prove that, they're somebody that qualifies to visit him. It's a security measure that prisons use. Yeah. How long before do you have to apply for such a visit? I mean, how long does it take for someone to be allowed to visit? I mean, this whole process, it sounds very difficult.
And who is allowed to visit him?
From what I've seen, a few weeks. Okay. They have to get... But it also depends on what state. Plus, this this takes place in a time period that I'm not that familiar with, being in the early 90s. So whatever so like I said, I really emphasized what I've seen.
Okay. Also coming back to this whole prison politics, what I find most interesting, also the few tidbits I read when I looked up the different gangs, how they are able to earn money in prison. And I'm not talking about working in the kitchen or in the laundry room. I mean, it's mind-boggling. How much money can you make? And like she said, how realistic is that? Tell us, James. You know it.
There's the common rackets that go on in prison. Smuggling in illegal items, extortion. Those are the two biggest ones. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it it's transferred. A lot of transactions are done. You have inside prison where money is not allowed. Mm-hmm. There's no cash in prison. Yeah. So they resort to pretty much anything. Commissary, dental products, even contraband can be switched between them. Electronics. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One common thing I've seen is that, a lot of guys will, sell their TV or they'll give it away to somebody, which isn't allowed. Mm-hmm. But, most people don't really gripe about that, from what I've seen where, one inmate will give another inmate a bar of soap. And then later on, that inmate will give that guy some candy and some shampoo to make up for what he owes him. That's all that all happens all the time. And most of us we're not too bothered by it. But a lot of the larger payments and whatnot from illegal businesses take place typically outside of prison. And then the inmates find a way to get access to that money in a way. Mm-hmm. The way I did it with ICE was I kept it simple for myself, which is just they use their contacts in the outside world. Because really that's how it runs. They all have contacts in the outside world. If they didn't have that, there's really not much they could really do for, to run their businesses. So they're pretty dependent on people outside the walls.
Mm. And the appearance of mobile phones, I guess, has made it easier for them because it could get smuggled in.
What, to make money?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would depend on their ingenuity and their access to technology, which really does fluctuate, again, depending on where you are. Cell phones are strictly prohibited in prison. Mm-hmm. Even I'm not allowed to bring my phone in. You have to keep it secured somewhere, not on grounds. Okay. Otherwise, it's a fireable offense.
Oh, okay. So because they have to make sure
it's so dangerous a product to have in prison.
Okay. So if they steal it from you or attack you because of that, could that happen?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Okay. And the last thing you want is a dangerous convicted felon taking your phone and saying, "Oh, is this your mom? This is your dad? This is your bank account? This is your Facebook?"
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, it's your address, so you don't forget where you live. Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna call some people up on your phone.
Yeah.
Seems a bit dangerous. Yeah.
Yep. It does indeed. Yeah.
Quite.
Yeah. You mentioned shortly his family. His mom visits him. I mean, they walk the straight line. They are not involved in any illegal things, in any criminal things. Are they his safe haven?
Yes. For a lot of inmates, their family and the friends is what keeps them going. Mm-hmm. A lot of them. Mm-hmm. It's maintaining that connection outside of prison, because prison can be it can really kind of suck you in. Mm-hmm. And for especially people that are going home one day, they really, it's basically their lifeline to still being a normal person. Because when you're in prison, you just don't feel that way. Yeah. Even as a staff person, it's very tempting for us to stay in like a prison mindset. Mm-hmm. I was actually commenting on this to some people the other day, it's so funny how, you'll see inmates cooking food, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, we're making," I'm just gonna make something up. "We're making a cheesecake." Mm-hmm. Cheesecake? How do you make a cheesecake in here? How does that happen? I mean, out in the world, you can just look it up on Google. Like, how did you guys figure it out? It's just, it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, you want to see it? I'm curious to see what it looks like. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's what it looks like. Wow, that's pretty amazing. Whereas out in the world, you can have all these, these elaborate desserts and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, wow, that's a lot of detail to that. And it's just kind of seeing I don't know. I just thought it's funny that that's just how prison can be. It's very immersive. Even like out in the world, we're so curious about, what prison is like because it's just such an unknown world to most of us.
Because it's so secluded.
Yeah.
Yes.
And is it kind of like living in a bubble in some way, in a negative way? But
definitely. There is that whole thing of institutionalization that happens among inmates, and even staff go through it sometimes, where it just becomes most of what it becomes your identity. Whereas in somebody that's a little bit more that doesn't go through that, they understand that it is part of who they are, but it's not the main part.
So if someone has a life sentence and probably won't come out or not for a very long time, I think this lifeline's not there. So it's
well, it depends on your mindset. I've seen a lot of inmates overturn their cases or get resentenced. A lot of those guys are fighting their cases. I know one guy who's doing a life bit. He is a life sentence. He is fighting. Basically, he's saying he didn't do it, and he's fighting to get it overturned. It takes a while. I saw another inmate. He was in prison for a very long time, over 3 decades. And one day I was scrolling through one of my social media, and I saw something about him, and I was like, huh. And it was a news article saying that he was released. He was exonerated. I was like, what? And it turns out after 30 some years, he didn't do it. And he's been fighting it for 30 years, but you do have a lot of inmates that have been incarcerated for a very long time, and they just become accustomed to the prison life. So it becomes their world.
Yeah. I suppose it is also hard for them to cope with the outside world then.
Yes, you do see that. I've seen that before. When you're away from society for such a long time, I mean, just imagine prison's one thing, but imagine it's basically being out in the woods for 20 years, and then you're sent back into society. Every now and then you get a letter, a postcard, a picture. Maybe you have television access, but it's one thing to have television access to it, and it's another to, go back after missing out on 20 years of technological advance and changes in your world. I've seen guys talk that have been in prison for 20 years, and they'll talk to each other. Oh, do you remember that McDonald's that John used to work at? Yeah, the McDonald's over there on 1st and 2nd Street. And I'm thinking, I know that place. I know exactly where they're talking about. That's not a McDonald's anymore. It's a Walmart now. They have no idea that that's changed.
Yeah.
The world outside stands still for them in some way.
Yes. Yeah. Their life's on pause, but they get older.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
What it's like.
If you walk down a street, you've walked down a lot of times before and haven't been there for maybe a few years. And you walk down there and say, oh, that's new and that's new and that's new. But it's only the shops that are new. Yeah. But for them, much more is new. The way people dress, probably, maybe they talk and behave, because it changes very fast. It's
true.
Right.
True. I mean,
especially when it's all you knew. Like I moved out of my hometown 6 years ago. I live somewhere else now, and once or twice a month we go back to go to a restaurant or see somebody, and I'm always like just fascinated by how different everything looks.
Yep.
Now imagine 20 years in a box away from everything.
Hard to imagine, to be honest. I mean, Ice is lucky in this regard. I mean, he has a very short sentence, and it gets even shortened. Not giving anything away, dear listeners. You have to read it. As I say it again, it's absolutely worth your time. It's a fascinating read, and it's a very good read. I mean, you left us hanging. I said it before. And I have to tell you that, dear readers, you have to keep on waiting, because you will want to know what's going to happen next. I suppose you're writing. You said something like that. You're writing part 3 now?
Maybe part 4?
Maybe part 4?
Definitely a part 3. I'm working on it right now. Most likely a part 4. I don't know if there will be a part 5. Pretty much all my writing I shoot from the hip. So, but the way that number 3 is going, that it's going so far, there's definitely going to be a sequel to that one as well.
Something to absolutely look forward to. Because despite all his shortcomings, let's call it that, his shortcomings, I mean, Alex is a character, or Ice, we want to learn more about. We want to see more of him. And like I said, he does have a moral code and he stands by this moral code. And that's what makes you want to know more and about him. And you want him to win. Let's put it that way. It's a bit like with your Johnny Carlo. You want him to win.
It makes him sympathetic.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I say, bring it on, bring it on. And your new book, which came out in January 2023, Life's Dark Corners. There are 5 stories in there. What can you tell us about this new book of yours?
Oh, of course. So that's this one right here.
Yeah.
So Life's Dark Corners, like you said, is actually 5 different stories. That came about because around the same time I was writing the Ballad of Johnny Carlo, a contest came out where they were looking for people to write short crime stories. I wrote one and I submitted it, but they ended up not taking it. So I said, okay, I'm going to create a collection of short stories on my own then. And so I started doing that. So like I said, it's 5 stories. They're all completely separate from each other, but they're in the same universe.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So one story, the first story is Shallow Seeds, which tells the story of Calvin, who is a longtime criminal on the street, very small time. You know, he's never been anything above like a petty thief, pretty much. And he's just kind of tired of scraping by, which is most criminals are not huge money makers, so he's trying to find that thing he's good at. And he eventually does find something he's good at, but it has disastrous results. Hence the shallow seeds. He's not sowing his seeds on good fertile ground, so the fruits that he's growing are not to his favor. The second story is I'm trying to go through the stories in order. That is A Soldier's Widow. So this one's actually quite different because my main character in this one is Janine, who is actually a civilian. She's not a gangster. She's not a cop. She's a regular woman. So she's elderly. Her husband had passed away a couple years ago, and she's pretty much living a normal life. Her kids are grown. She's in the twilight of her life, just living it. And then one day she's targeted by 2 hitmen. They bust down the door, and she gets the drop on them. And ends up killing one of them in self-defense because her husband was a Vietnam War veteran who taught her how to use his guns that he brought back from the military. So, she's not just some harmless old woman. I mean, she's not like, a Green Beret or anything, but she learned what her husband taught her. And then it's a story of, that is there somebody in the family that was plotting this acting, why are these hitmen targeting her of all people who has no enemies? The third story is Wish Not to Remember. And that tells the story of Stephen, who wakes up in a hospital with amnesia, has no idea who he is, where he is, why he's there. And the day he wakes up, they alert the doctor, who calls his brother. His brother comes in, who is a homicide detective, pretty much. And Stephen he's a photographer for crime scenes. And during this time, there is a serial killer on the loose in the city. And Stephen eventually takes it upon himself to kind of throw his own hat into the ring and try to figure out what's going on with these murders. But he comes to find out that, the culprit may be familiar to him, and then the truth may hit a little closer to home than he anticipated.
Oh.
And then the fourth story is a lyric for Brutus. So that is actually, because I remember saying that the Ballad of Johnny Carlo could be expanded upon, so I did. And I took Brutus Claymore, who is in the Ballad of Johnny Carlo, he is the right-hand man and bodyguard of Frank Abraham, who is the father of Alicia, who is the second protagonist and love interest of Johnny Carlo in the book. So Brutus, this is actually 20 years before the Ballad of Johnny Carlo.
Okay.
Brutus is just coming home. His mother just passed, and he was in medical school in Pennsylvania. So he reunites with his father, and he's decided to move back home to be with his family, be with his father, their family was very close.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, there's a gang war going on between the old guard and a new upstart by the name of Frank Abraham. So it's the origin story it's mainly Brutus, but it also tells about how him and Frank came to know one another.
Okay.
So I enjoyed that one. I've been wanting to expand on the story. You get to see Leisha as a young girl and stuff, and before she becomes the dynamic heroine that she becomes. So I had a lot of fun with that one. And then my fifth story is A Fantasy Best to Forget, and that tells the story of Dean. So Dean is like Janine. He is a regular citizen, but he's got a problem. He's 14 years old and he's very into violent video games. And eventually he decides he fantasizes about escalating. And so the story is he plots this misdeed that he wants to commit, because to him that's what he thinks that he wants to do. So he's very young, very impressionable, doesn't realize the permanence of his actions yet. So I'll leave that one there because that's a shorter story than the others. So there's, if I go too much in, it's going to give more away.
Yeah. Okay. They all sound fascinating.
Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. No, I have to read them. Definitely. I definitely have to read them. All of them sound good. Absolutely. And you remain an indie author, no matter what. Yes.
I say until a publishing company comes with a very sweetheart deal. I'm not going to settle for 15%. No, I've worked too hard for that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, you have to do everything. Like I said before we started the recording, you have been busy doing the PR for yourself, being present on social media. It takes a lot of time. And getting your books out, promoting the books in every possible way, and the things you have to do. I mean, you have to do your own book. What are they called? Bookmarks, and put them there. And did you have the chance, now that the pandemic is near over, to do readings or signings at book fairs or libraries or bookshops? Is there any kind of events?
Yes, actually. I believe August was my first event, or was it late July? And yeah, I really pushed myself and I started going to book signings. It's a little difficult because it's in the colder months, but and it's been a lot of fun just being out there around people with my books. I get to stand there and really represent myself in person, engage with people, and it's really been a lot of fun. Even at some events, I've had people from other booths and tables come up to me and say, so what are your books about? Oh, well, my pleasure.
So were the different genres present?
Oh, it depends on where I was. The first event was actually a very large event. I was in the little author's corner, me and a few other people that I actually knew, some friends of mine whose books I've bought and read and loved and stuff. And one of them, I did a podcast on her channel. Another was I think he was like a local folk or country singer who I didn't know about him, but he was having an event. And I said, it was only $10 to have a booth there. So I said, why not? And I was the only author there. That really kind of different from everybody. Like, the people next to me were selling flavored dog treats, which I'm glad I noticed, because the flavors were looking pretty tasty until I noticed the dog treats sign. I said, oh, I was about to walk over too. Oh, it's for dogs. Okay.
Now you have to get one.
Whew, man, that was a waste.
I mean, they probably wouldn't be unhealthy for humans.
Who knows? Who knows? Although I wouldn't. I mean, it depends on what is in them. Maybe that's an idea for another book. Flavored dog treats and how to use them for humans. Yeah, anyway, I just...
Maybe poison them?
Yeah, exactly.
Sir, I wouldn't feed this to a dog.
No, not for the dogs. No.
Put them in the sugar bowl.
Actually, that event I did very well in too. I sold like a dozen books there, and I was so surprised because I told my wife this because it was in a very more rural area compared to where I'm from, and it was a Thursday night. It was 3 hours long, 6 to 9 in September. And I said, well, if I sell one book, I make my money back. And I sold a dozen books. And I left there saying, oh, never judge a book by its cover.
It was a success.
Indeed, it is.
When's that guy having another event? What's his name again? Okay, I want to know because I'm going to follow him. He made me a lot of money.
Well, maybe. Who knows? I mean, has it become then easier for you now that you're doing all these things? I mean, do you have developed a sort of routine for yourself? How and when to do these promotional things, especially also the social media part?
Yes. Like everything, the first time you do it, it's very hard. Like since we've talked, I've been on, quite a few podcasts and stuff. So I've grown really accustomed to it. The first time I was scared to death. And now it's something that, I mean, it's still hard. So I'm not trying to say the wrong things and stuff. As you know, I'm not trying to, say the wrong thing, just derail the whole thing. Oh, he said that. All right. That's the end. Thank you. And the events, I've had a couple events that I didn't do very well in, and it is what it is. It's the nature of the beast. And then, as I've mentioned before, I'm on TikTok now. That was a stretch. Is trying to really put yourself out there, by yourself, because podcasts are very helpful because you guys give me stuff to talk about. On TikTok, I have to figure out like, hi guys, the weather today is something, huh? Buy my books, please. Click.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's always the same when I do some invitation videos for either be it a live stream, or when the last year, wrapping up the last year for our Christmas message. Okay, how to start this thing and what to say. And after the fourth or fifth take, you might do good.
It's just a short video in the end, but it takes a lot of preparation.
Yes. I remember my first TikTok I did. I was promoting my book, and somebody commented. They said it's his first TikTok, and he's selling books. So at first I was like, oh, let me just delete that. But then my wife had the idea. She's like, yeah, that's what you're trying to do. And so on my next book, on my next TikTok, I said, listen, guys, I'm not trying to sell books. I'm trying to sell my books. and then just slowly I kind of raised one of my books up. Look at that.
Yeah, why not? Of course, and be present. Exactly. I mean, you've already touched a little bit about what's coming. Any more plans, James? Book-wise, or any other, I don't know, wise?
Definitely. So I am writing the third book in the Ice series. It's going to be called Ice Reign, Reign. I can give a little bit of that away. Ice has, obviously if there's a sequel, he lives. And he's back out. And now he not only has to, kind of figure out where he stands and with all his relationships, but things have changed out in the street. And now it's a question of some of his old allies are now enemies. And he is, I don't know if I should give it away, but it's, he stands to, there's a chance he may inherit the throne. Whereas in Ice Rising, he was a lieutenant.
Yeah.
Now things have changed, and there's talk. People are telling him that the guy that's currently running things, his time has passed, and it's your time to rise to the very top. And now he's in the middle of, should I seize this opportunity, or should I stay loyal to somebody that, even though we're having a falling out, they've been with me for a very long time. So you're going to see the introduction, the reintro of a lot of old characters that didn't get much screen time in Icebox. They're back, and you're going to see new sides to them. Even I have seen new sides to some of these characters. Some people that I thought I was going to kind of just write them off as this situation. That not only have they come back, but they become so dynamic that what you expected is not always what's going to be. Yeah. So there's that. I have an idea for a 6th book. It's been kind of playing in my head. I really wanted to start working on an outline for it, but because of the fact that I am a pantser, it's pretty much just going to be right off the top of my head. I can't say if Ice Rain will be released this year. I just finished chapter 18 today, so I can't tell you. I can tell you it's going to be amazing. And I will have updates. I do have a website out, jamesmichelsbooks.com. I just made that a week ago. And
I saw
it has
the announcement.
All my books on it. I'm sorry?
I saw the announcement or the announcement of your website.
Yes.
JamesMichelsBooks.com?
Yep, jamesmichelsbooks.com. And on there are all my books are on there, as well as my personal email for anybody that would like to reach me personally. I love to engage with readers. It's like food to me. And also I have my email subscription. So anybody that wants to stay up to date on my books, events that I might have coming up, deals and whatnot, go ahead and put your email on there and sign up for my email list so you can get updated. So let's see what else I have. Oh, and I've been playing around with the idea. I want to get one of my books on Audible. So I have the audio version. And I believe it's going to be The Battle of Johnny Carlo.
And how do you plan it? I mean, asking you because a friend of ours who has paid for a narrator herself to get her books out on Audible, not just, I think it does that automatically somehow. I don't know.
I think you need someone to create
Yeah, but do you plan on doing that? Or
paying somebody to do it?
Yeah, find the perfect person to do it?
Well, my plan is I actually want to have 2 people read it, only because I want for the female characters to have a female voice and the male characters to have a male voice, if that's possible. And I know I can either pay the readers either a lump sum or a share of the royalties. And between the two, I wouldn't mind having somebody have a share in the royalties, only because then it would motivate them to really put that work out there because, they can get paid over time.
Yep.
But I've been toying with that. It would definitely open up a new avenue for me. And that's just what I've been doing every year, is just doing bigger and better than the last year. So this would be a very big jump for me.
Hilary Huber is the name of the narrator we spoke to about a friend of ours' books. She read the 3 of them, and she's also narrating her new one called The Barry's Contagion, which is a political thriller, which will be out on the 15th of March. So, and she also does quite good accents, for example.
Okay.
Just in case you were looking for someone. Just saying.
Is she on one of the other episodes?
Yep. I just looked up which episode it was. We had her and the author. Last year. It is episode 51 with C.A. Farlow and Hilary Huber. We spoke about her Nexus series and the work of Hilary as a narrator, what it entails and how she works and how she practices for reading the books and how she prepares and what she does as a narrator and how that all comes together.
Okay.
James, is there anything else you would like our listeners to know?
So all my books are available on Amazon. They're all available on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. And I don't plan on ever taking them off because I love Kindle Unlimited. They all have their own paperback versions. And Battle of Johnny Carlo also has a hardcover. Life's Dark Corners just came out January 25th. So definitely check that out, especially for people that are kind of maybe dabble in crime thriller. It's perfect read, very well-rounded cast of stories and characters. A little bit something for everybody. Some serial killer thriller, urban thriller, origin stories and stuff. So definitely check it out. Icebox, like I said, if you haven't checked out Icebox, check out Ice Rising. It's Icebox is literally takes you right back to the end of Ice Rising. So you're not missing anything.
Splendid. Teacup?
Yep.
Wonderful. James, thank you so much for joining us again. It was a pleasure talking to you again. And
thank you. It was a pleasure being on here again.
It was wonderful. And we keep our fingers crossed for the new books and also for everything else that's going to come. And you know where to find us. And you're always welcome to join us again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You did enjoy this episode as much as we did? Then hit subscribe and don't miss the next episode. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. If you like to support us and buy us a coffee, you can do so via Buy Me a Coffee and other platforms. You can find all the necessary links in the description. Until next time.